call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for Thursday, April 11th, 2024, beginning at 9 a.m. here in the Community Center, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Preston,
Here.
Vice Chair Lloyd, Commissioner Brooks, here. Commissioner Borders, here. Commissioner DeChristopher, Commissioner Kilgore,
Here.
Commissioner Cron.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. May I ask Commissioner Lloyd to say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, it's open for public comment. Seeing no public, I'd like to go on to the meeting items. Meeting item number 5A is for possible action, discussion, and possible action or direction regarding progress on the master plan update. Hope, please.
Thank you. So first I'll reintroduce, you've met them before, Darcy White and Maggie Squire from Clary and Associates. They're our consultant working with us on the master plan update. They're in town and we're running them ragged with so many meetings. We're getting them in front of anybody who we can. So it's been a really busy day yesterday. We have another busy day ahead of us today. With the consultants coming to town, and this commission knows, we've been working on the master plan update. We've been trying to generate community interest, community involvement, informing the community, because we're really, really committed. I think this commission and staff as well, that this is not a staff-driven plan. This is a community-driven plan, and I say that every chance I have to say that. And so I feel so strongly about that, and so strongly that we need the community. That said, I'm going to give a quick commercial. Tonight, we have 2 meetings in this building. One is at 2 o'clock, and the other is at 5:30 for the community to come out and learn about what the consultants have been working on with the master plan, and it will be an opportunity for the community to provide more input. There's also a virtual meeting on Thursday, April 18th at 5 o'clock. And all of the information is available on our website. If you go to community development, you can navigate to the master plan update website, which is envision with an E, carsoncity.org/participate. So with that, when we knew Maggie and Darcy were coming to town, something we thought about as a staff level, given all the meetings you all have been participating in, is it would be a good idea to give the commissioners a chance to meet with the consultants and kind of provide them with your input, your perspective, what you're hearing. And in talking to the chair about that, the chair said, well, why don't we just have a meeting instead of each of us individually having a meeting? So this meeting is not a chance, it's not a time when the consultants are presenting to you. Rather, it's a time when you're almost presenting to the consultants and telling them what meetings have you been attending, and even outside the meetings, because I know the meetings are generating a lot of conversation throughout the community. So you're hearing things outside these meetings. And so it's a chance for you to provide that input to the consultants, just to, again, underscore this is a community-driven plan. And with that, I'll stop and turn it over to you, Chair.
What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is I'd like to start at one end of the group and say what meeting you attended and what kind of feedback you got. We did this before, so let's go ahead and do that again. And if you have anything new or any new thoughts or any outside meetings. So I'd like to start with you, Commissioner Brooks.
Not sure I need the mic, but it makes me feel powerful. So the most recent meeting I attended with Hope and with the consultants was the building community yesterday. And as I was saying to Commissioner DeChristopher, my bias, if you will, is that I take input from people who are putting capital at risk and want to be part of the community's future rather than part of its stasis very seriously. And the input was a mix of things we had heard before, tied to what works and what doesn't, our infrastructure problems, things that we've all discussed before to some degree or another. I don't want to rehash. One of the things that was nice to hear was that it's relatively cheaper to build in town here, not on a land use basis, but on a fee and regulation basis than it is in some of the surrounding communities. Uh, in addition to that meeting, I was at the Lions meeting, and I've been busy wearing my neighbors out in my neighborhood at the north end of town, getting their input as well. And in terms of my input, the thing that I am struck by is that the public, even a sophisticated public like the builders yesterday, is not drawing any distinction at all between their personal laundry list of aspirations and problems with the city and with the core land use planning function of the master plan. So the master plan, and you've all been to meetings, I'm sure that you've experienced some flavor of this. Once you ask people for input on the master plan, what you're really getting is input on what I like and don't like and am afraid of losing in the city. My primary takeaway from that, having heard a lot of contradictory things, right? We want more of this, but we want everything to stay the same. That's my shorthand for it, right? And that may be unfair to the nuance of some of the input we've gotten, but there is a thread of that running through a lot of the conversations I've heard. One of the things that I've been able to distill out of that, and I offer it as broad rather than specific input, is whatever land use changes we are making in the master plan should be flexible enough to recognize that it could very well be another 15 years before we touch this plan again. I don't think that's anybody's intent, but the last one was what, 18 years, 19 years, something like that?
The adoption is 2006, and there's an annual update.
Okay, so there's an annual update, but a major revision is probably not coming. We have a lot of variables that frankly we can't control. I am less than confident of our ability to direct the state on how to staff and where to staff, for example. So land use designations that trickle down into zoning specificity should allow for reasonably easy organic changes to the land use. I'm not saying that residential use should be turned into multi-story commercial at the drop of a hat. I am saying that, for example, residential use could accommodate a corner store, or commercial could accommodate a transition to multifamily residential, perhaps easier than it currently does. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Commissioner DeChristopher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go back to the first meeting. I've already spoken to the meeting that Hope and I attended on March 9th over at the library, but it was interesting because there was a common thread that started going from various audiences. This audience was general public, and one of the things that was a surprise to us that came up and actually kind of heated or exciting was nightlife, lack of nightlife in Carson City. I hadn't previously heard that. Then it was interesting because yesterday we met over at the legislative building, and we were with Nick Anthony, the incoming LCB director, and John Vietti, the unit chief facility, and Dirk Goring, I'm pronouncing his name correctly, transportation planner, I think is what yeah. Okay. It was an interesting conversation, and Darcy and Megan and Cecilia were present as well. And it came up because they first, of course, were asked, what do you like about Carson City? And they really liked the downtown redevelopment that occurred, not just for lawmakers that are visiting every other year, but their own staff and themselves. But specifically addressing session because we do close early. not always a good thing to have happen. So I found that interesting that it's noted not just by the general public, but by those who are employed here. The other thing that came up that I thought was interesting was we're talking about transportation. And one of the things that keeps bubbling up is let's not stop the routes to buildings such as the legislature because we want to continue getting the public there. So all these things are coming up and they have connectivity with other discussions that are going on with other commissions. And I know Megan and Darcy are doing a great job of keeping track, and I think we all are too, of things that we hear that may not be directly in our purview, but things that need to be addressed as we go forward. The thing that I found the most interesting that came out of this was towards the end. In asking them about their thoughts of Carson City in terms of living here, we discovered that none of the three live in Carson City. One is Dayton, one South Reno, one Minden. And in discussing that a little further, the reasoning was, the initial response was high cost of housing, but they backed that up very quickly with, had they been looking at housing at a different time, that may have been different. Because now they're in established housing and to move would not be a good economic decision for them. And they made the point, reaching people at a younger age, those who haven't made homeownership decisions yet, might be an area to focus on, or at least be aware of as we move forward, which brings us back to housing affordability. So I just keep wanting to underscore that. One thing that I want to bring up that has been coming up through the community in conversations with business people, I hope we have time to address the homeless population. And I know there have been meetings going on in the community that represent both business owners as well as homeless advocates. I've been to the one, a homeless advocate movie that was shown at St. Peter's by the gentleman who does production for This Is Reno. And it was very interesting, but I recognized in watching it that yes, some of the clips, it was intended to be thought-provoking and they achieved that. But I know when I watch something, I imagine how it's being watched and absorbed by people with different backgrounds or experiences. And I know there's things that can be very polarizing. I was encouraging that group, primarily homeless advocates active in our community, to attend the chamber function on the 24th, which will be primarily business owners. Because I have exposure to both, I realize there's a discussion that can happen that can have some substance to it and be very meaningful and educate each other. So I'm hoping we continue going forward in that direction because regardless of where I stand in the community, it is coming up more often. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may. First, just two quick thoughts, both based on what Commissioner Brooks and Commissioner DeChristopher said. Commissioner Brooks is correct. We're hearing things that aren't necessarily specific to the master plan or that will be addressed through the master plan. But what is happening is we are hearing. And the chairman knows this. And I'm talking to my colleagues in the city. I'm talking to our partners in the private sector. I'm letting them know what we're hearing. And there are meetings that are occurring that we're not participating in. Maggie asked me yesterday about a meeting that we had been talking about that was yesterday was the meeting. I didn't attend it. But we were talking about it because it was a meeting that occurred based on our listening tour, and it was a private meeting. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone because you may think to yourself, my gosh, I'm sitting through these meetings and they're not even talking about our stuff. Well, all the stuff's good stuff, and we're definitely addressing it. Secondly, Commissioner DeChristopher, I'm not sure, and perhaps I missed it, but did you talk about the office space in Vegas? And I think that's really
No,
interesting.
But
Thank you.
my apologies. Yes, that was very important because I know, thank you. In prior conversations, there has been concern about the office space that is being built down in the Las Vegas area. And it always feels a little threatening when you're sitting here as the capital and that money's going there. What was pointed out is, number one, it's really in response to the poor condition of the Grant Sawyer building. That space has been a problem. We all know it. It's been in the paper consistently indicating that they're having issues there. So in order to keep the public engaged and lawmakers with a space to do their business when they're down in the South, they are making that investment, and they did not feel, all three gentlemen in attendance were very quick to say, no, that is not the case at all. This is primarily to ensure that Las Vegas does have facilities. And I would note one part of the discussion was about remembering that people in the South, the public, have to have access to Grant Sawyer in order to be able to give testimony. And this was before COVID. We were always very good, excuse me. They have always been very good about getting testimony in and making it open to the public. So I felt better having heard that, and hoped you have something to add to that.
Yeah, it was, and I think the chairman was in the meeting later in the day that she'll talk about, but it was really an eye opener and refreshing. And I have to say, all of the meetings have been really candid in my perspective. Nobody's been guarded. Everybody's been very forthcoming with the information. And I think it speaks to the partnerships, and we keep hearing through this whole process. We're a small town. I think of being a small town, a lot of it is the culture, and the culture is we communicate. We sit in a room together and we talk. All of that said, what they explained in that meeting that Commissioner DeChristopher is referring to is they have office space in strip malls. They have office space in buildings that they're not going to use anymore because they're old and they're dated. And so their investment in facilities in Vegas is not to yield more space. It's to replace the spaces that they don't find to be appropriate. So I think that was really good information to get. Is that how you saw it?
It is. I apologize for not getting that on the front end. But it was but important, granular. And it was nice to end the meeting on the note. I believe them when they tell us they will reach out to us and continue to have communication so that Carson City and the state of Nevada have an active partnership. I was pleased to hear that.
Me. I think what we'll do, we'll bring that on because we met with the state too, so we'll bring that on. That'll be answered.
Yeah, and just for context, if the public's watching, there's three branches of the state government. There's the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the administrative branch. The legislative branch and the administrative branch both have buildings, but they don't. They each manage their own buildings. Let's put it that way. Judicial branch doesn't really have buildings, and so it was two separate meetings. So Commissioner DeChristopher went to the meeting with the legislative branch, and the chairman went to the meeting with the administrative branch.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I had spoken about going to the meeting with the men's club at the last meeting, and the meeting that I attended most recently was at the library. It was the last meeting there. It was on the 30th of March, and that was a very interesting meeting. There were some high schoolers there from AP. So human geography. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what their input was, and then I'll talk about what the rest of the community was, what the rest of the community's input was. We also did have Supervisor Schutte there with us. So the high schoolers talked about things that they liked about the community, that it's clean. They love the hot springs. They love community service and involvement. Again, some of these things didn't necessarily have to do with the master plan, but I think preserving some of these things in what we look at the master plan moving forward. We want these high schoolers to stay in Carson City. And so I think that even though we are not necessarily focused on some of these things, I think that these are very important things to look at and ensure that we are taking into consideration. Winter sports, they love the legislative buildings. Now, that could have had an impact because we did have our youth senator for District 16 in the audience. And McFadden Square, walkability, job opportunities they liked here in Carson. The ability to navigate Carson quickly. And the hospital and medical care, knowing that they can access all of those things here in Carson City and not having to go outside of Carson to access those, and hiking. Now, I do, for those listening, if you haven't ever heard this before, and this is one of the things that when I moved to Carson City, I found interesting. You know, Carson City has city in its name, but we're really a consolidated municipality. So we provide not just city services, but also county services as well, like our library services, which neighboring counties provide library services, but the cities don't necessarily provide those services. And so that's just kind of something to note when we're talking about what does our community, our Carson City look like, and what do we want it to continue to look like. And when we talked about what would we kind of change in Carson City, our high schoolers talked about more activities for the youth, and it came out of every single one of their mouths. And that ranged from potentially nightlife, maybe not like partying nightlife, but something to do, to ensuring that there were more opportunities for apprenticeships and trades and workforce outside of college, to more affordable housing so that they can stay here in Carson City and that they can live their life here, and addressing houselessness or homelessness, which is something that you had brought up as well. Some of them brought up specific locations in which some of these things could happen, and they brought up things that are locations in which we have talked about, and that was the Kmart building or other empty building, the old Kmart building, the other empty buildings that we have addressed in the past. So I'm not going to go into all of those specific locations, but that's just some examples. One aspiring youth did bring up maintenance of 280 miles of roadways and figuring out how to sustainably maintain those roads. And that's something that we need to figure out as a community and how to do that, whether that belongs in the master plan or not. If that is something that the community, and it does look like outside of our current master plan, it is something that the community is greatly invested in at this moment. I think that it's something we could consider. Now, I did have another planning commissioner there with me, and so maybe I can leave the rest of that meeting to our other planning commissioner.
Certainly.
Okay. Do you want to address the
Yes.
other community members, Vern?
So I think you've covered it very, very well. It was a.
Whoa. I want to go in
sorry.
order.
Sorry.
But, okay. So what do we do is now Commissioner Borders. Just go.
Sorry.
No problem. Yes.
So yes, I was supposed to be at the meeting on the 30th, but I wasn't able to. I mean, it was the first one that was actually not a conflict of my scheduling, but I did get pretty sick, so I was not able to attend. I didn't want to put anyone else at risk there. But I just had a question real quick. You were mentioning that there was some engagement and possibly questioning, I don't want to quote you, but with happiness in regards to job opportunity? Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, so some of the youth were happy with the job opportunities. So they looked at the opportunities coming into the job market as they were happy with the opportunities that they were given. Like there were many, and they were very happy with that. The other comment of what they would like to see more of is coming into like a career workforce, that they would like to see more opportunities for actual implementation of like apprenticeships applying to like their actual career opportunities. I could get more into the weeds about that, but at Carson High School, some of the CTE programs, the programs that they do and the time they spend don't necessarily apply directly to internship time or apprenticeship time. And so then they have to like redo some of that time. And so they feel like it's kind of a waste of their time.
Thank you so much.
Chair, if I can just mention, the chairman was at a meeting where there was also a discussion about career training, and Commissioner Cron was also at a different session where that came up as well. And so you'll hear about that. And internally, we had a meeting with full-time city employees in their 20s to discuss their sort of perspective as young professionals and kind of what is appealing to them about Carson City and working in Carson City and so on and so forth. So that's actually been sort of a bit of a theme that's been repeating at these meetings. And I think there's lots of themes that are repeating. So it was an interesting follow-up question because that's definitely something that we're hearing a lot of, and we're kind of exploring how do we keep employees here. And it goes back to what Commissioner DeChristopher said. And I mean, one person said he would gladly live in Carson, except for he started his family somewhere else, and he didn't want to uproot the family and move them. And so the idea was, okay, how do we get people in their 20s before they have their families and create a climate where there's great career opportunities as well as work opportunities? And that's something that's kind of a repeating theme. Thank you.
We go to Commissioner Borders.
Okay.
Okay.
I attended with the Builders Alliance meeting and have had several conversations. I'd like to keep most of what I have to say toward land use and master planning. Because we know, I think we've all had an education in the community, and I think that's a good thing to do. But the interesting thing to me that came out of that, because we've been talking about affordability and how do we let people live here, and the comment was made that we need as a community to be able to raise our FHA loan criteria to a higher level than it is in some of the surrounding areas like Reno, so that people can, quote, borrow more money to pay for these houses that are being built. Apparently, there's a discrepancy between the ceiling, the FHA ceiling that we can, in Carson City, can borrow money, as opposed to Reno and Las Vegas and other larger cities where their base of real estate value is larger, which led the comment from the Builders Association, we don't need smaller houses, we need more expensive ones. And that's kind of an oxymoron, because that's contradictory to what we think we want to do. And the question I have is also, how many $2 million houses do we need to build to raise the FHA level to another $50,000, and it may not, it may be a self-defeating purpose. The other land use, things we hear continually are, we have, and one of them is we have too many zones and areas, we have too many empty buildings, and you all know that. One of the things that I hope we're going to try and address is some sort of a way to get state and federal land use released, or at least give us access to, because there's a lot of it, and most of it's not on the tax rolls. It would be wonderful if we could take some of that vacant land that's just sitting there in somebody's kingdom or fiefdom and find a way to put other uses to it that would better serve the city of Carson City. And finally, I think I've been guilty of this. We stand around and we're having all these meetings and we're saying we're informing the public, and if they don't come, it's their own fault because we've made the effort. I think we're not, and maybe you can educate me more, but I think we're not getting enough to the Hispanic community, despite the fact that we're trying. And I think we need to look at other ways to do that. And one of them that came to mind to me the other day is that at the high school, the Hispanic Club is full of very active young people. Many of them are also members of the new Interact Club at the school, and they have the ear of their parents. And if we can find a way to get, I think there's a data mine out there that we could mine if we can find a way, and we maybe have to put on our Hispanic hat instead of our Anglo hat and figure out how to do that, because I don't think it's working. I know we're trying, but I don't think it's working. And I think that's the next biggest piece that we need to try and get to. And the same thing goes with the native population. We have a good Indian population here, and they have a voice, and we need to try and make sure that we get their voice in this also. So that's my comments.
Hope, do you want to address that one?
No, I totally appreciate it, and I agree 100% with what Commissioner Borders said. I'll take the tribal group first. We involved them early on, and your input's good. We haven't had a focused meeting since the initial outreach, and we can certainly arrange that. As you know, we have a contract planner, Armando Ornelas, and I can ask him to go ahead and do that outreach and have that meeting. On the Hispanic community, I think Commissioner Borders is the one who told me about the Latinx group at the high school, which I wasn't familiar with. And I think you're right. If we can, we saw it at the library. If you involve the kids, they bring their parents. And so I think an outreach to them and involving Armando, who's Spanish speaking, could be successful. You're right. What we're trying is not working. That said, the chairman's reached out through the realtor community and Spanish speaking members of the realtor community, and they've expressed interest in helping get the word out and get involved in meetings. So we haven't hit the finish line on this. I'm not sure we hit the starting line. We're still trying to find that starting line. And but point well taken, and we'll keep trying.
Well, and all I'm trying to do is I know we're trying,
Mhm.
but I don't think what we've been doing was working.
I agree.
So we need to shift and try something different. But I think we need to continue that effort because they're 30% of our population. We need to not ignore them just because we can't get them to talk to us.
Agree.
Hope, who did, or with the tribal community, who did we reach out to? Do you No.
Darcy, did you take that interview or did Armando? Okay, was it Smokey? It was Smokey. The
Commissioner Kilgore?
Thank you. As I said earlier, I did miss the community meeting I was set to attend due to unforeseen circumstances. But I will say that the only reason I have anything to say is because I've run a community-driven business for the last 16 years, which is, of course, service-oriented, and in which case I speak to a lot of people from all different backgrounds, as many as I'd say 1,000 a month is what I serve. So that's very much localized. Most of the people I see are in our local area. There seems to be a lot of agreement with we should rally the king's horses and the king's men and go and steal some of that property, as Borders was saying, not so eloquently, I'm afraid. But it seems that there is some areas that even the younger generation wishes that they could make use of, being some of those vacant buildings. And I mean, as far as saying it and doing it, there's been a lot of saying it for the last 20 years since I've been active in the community, and not so much doing, but it takes money to do anything. Even just drive across town these days can be expensive. So the younger generation's really in a tough spot. And I don't know if I know that Hope was just saying, making it a place where you're appealing to a demographic and someone in their 20s, a family in their 20s that wants to move here. And, if that's really in our purview or not, I don't really know. But of course, affordable living is probably the most important thing to a family at that age and demographic, because this isn't a really affordable place to live, as we've seen. There are places that are more expensive, of course. I mean, I'd like to live in Malibu as well, but I don't think that's going to happen either. Just fortunate for myself that I did buy at a good time, as was spoken of earlier. Maybe if I had looked at a different time, then I would have been able to buy a house in Carson City. So fortunately, that was my case. And hopefully that happens again for that younger generation that we are trying to open up doors for, I guess, in a manner of speaking, as far as, that being within the master plan, making it more accessible for people in lower income, having some type of starter home package areas, or, just vetting for that seems impossible because there's going to be a long line of people wanting to get into places like that. So it just, I wish I knew a path. And there's a lot of ideas. That's the point, is that, yes, as much as you can talk to the community, everyone's got their ideas. And I mean, of course, when you talk to high schoolers, what they're going to want to do is open up places where they can have fun. And I find that to be the meaning of life, because if, your time is short, and the most important thing is to just have a good time. And, if that's not what you're doing, I think that, when we're getting on in our years, as some of us are, and we look back, the only thing that we really wish we could have done was have more fun. So of course that's going to be a big outcry from the youth, is that there's more to do. And I used to be able to provide that, but of course, probably within a good reason, I no longer can at my business, because I serve alcohol now. So I used to be able to have teen nights, and there was the only place that the high schoolers could go, and it would be a mess. There, 100 or so would be standing out on the sidewalk because there wasn't room for the whole high school. So it's probably better that I don't try to provide those nights anymore. And of course, now that I serve other refreshments, it's not exactly a good option. But I wish that I could afford to just open up a location for the high schoolers to just be able to go, because at least then they're not out on the streets. And that was really, really a comforting thing for me to do for a few years, was just be able to provide a safe environment for the youth to be able to go. And we just don't have anything like that anymore. I mean, and the money it would require to open a place like that is just unreasonable, and there's no return because most of them don't really have a lot of money to spend. So you'd kind of be looking at a loss. So maybe there could be some type of situation in grant money or something like that. Either way, like I said, I don't know the path. I know what the outcry is for that to exist, and hopefully one day it does. But in our community right now, it is what we're lacking, and hopefully we can open up some kind of area where that can be possible. Thank you.
Commissioner Cron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The meetings that I've been able to attend, which I've appreciated Hope's attitude of like, come on, if you want to come, come. So I've always appreciated that. My first foray into the public meeting thing was with Commissioner Lloyd at the library on Saturday. It was the last Saturday in March. So that was the first one I got into. The next one I met with the chair at the realtors, talked to the realtors. Then the other day I was up at WNC at the political science class. That was kind of eye-opening for me. And that was the first time I had a chance to interact with the consultant team in a small setting like that. And I do want to commend them. I thought they did very well with the students, interacting with them and drawing them out, with the exhibits you had. I really like that. I certainly did appreciate Trump's snapping the whip on the students to get them to move quickly, because they were just kind of looking at each other. So Hope took care of that in a quick minute. And then the other night, I had the chance to go to the Staybridge community meeting over at the Staybridge Hotel. So I was there also with the chair. So I've been able to get out, fortunately. I know everybody can't, but I've been able, fortunately, to do that. So I think regarding the library, I think Commissioner Lloyd did a great job explaining it. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat what she said, but I would like to touch on two things that I thought came out of the meeting, just to add to what she had mentioned, was Hope was using, the presentation style was, what do you like about Carson City and what would you change in Carson City? I thought those were very open-ended questions that really generated a lot of input from the community. So I think that worked really well. The other visual that she used that I really thought was really a great visual for people was looking at Carson City as a crown. And there are jewels in that crown that we like, and what jewels in those crowns do we need to either replace and or polish up? And so I thought that was also a great visual. And the visual that came out to me from these people that we haven't talked about yet today was the jewel of parks, recreation, parks, open space, and trails. So that was really almost consistently across the board at all four of my meetings. That was one of the consistent themes we heard. With that, so anyway, I don't want to get into each meeting. I want to approach it a little differently, maybe along the same line as Commissioner Borders did. I want to talk about it from. I'm going to go back to the themes and guiding principles in the master plan. So I'm going to make my comments based on those, similar to what Commissioner Border did. One of the themes within guiding principles within the existing master plan that we're updating is equitable distribution of recreational opportunities. And there were a number of people that appreciated the trail system in this community, both in town, the Valley Trail System, although they were a little bit retrospect regarding how sometimes that doesn't connect everywhere. But they also liked, but that was okay. I mean, it was one of those criticisms that they had, which I think was a constructive criticism, is the multi-use trails on the valley floor don't always connect. They like the opportunity for recreation up in the hills. Prison Hill came up a number of times throughout these meetings about, especially the OHV at the south end. There was a gentleman in the political science class that I was in that liked the rock crawl. And he shared something with me that I didn't realize, but he said the rock crawling community nationwide knows about Prison Hill. So I thought that was kind of an interesting point that he brought up, a younger guy. So that perspective, they love the open space, talked about not only the BLM, but the Forest Service land and then the city-owned land. So those were those things. So I think from addressing it from an equitable distribution of recreational opportunities, I think the community feels that the city has done a fairly good job with that, in addressing the themes and guiding principles there. From a livable neighborhood and activity centers, again, again, the commissioners brought up walkability. That was a big thing. We had a number of people that loved to walk downtown. So, and that probably goes into a connected community, because I'm going to talk about, So the livable neighborhood, trying to stay focused. Livable neighborhoods and activity centers, I think people like that small town feel. I took that. If you were to kind of label it, I would put that into that category as when you talk about a small town feel, you're talking about a livable neighborhood and activity centers. You're talking about being a small community, which you can get to anywhere. And this was repeatedly said with some of the younger people we had in our audiences, that you can get to anywhere in this town in about 10, 15 minutes. And that was really a likable aspect of the community. The thing that also that I thought came up a lot was the city as a whole being centrally located. So when you talk about a livable community, again, livable neighborhoods and activity centers, they looked at this place as a great place to be able to go to Reno, go to the Lake Tahoe, go to even further out than that, go over to the Bay Area, to Sacramento, to Las Vegas. They felt this was really one of those gems that they had in that crown that they liked for being a livable neighborhood and activity center as far as the town goes. Jumping back a little bit, I'm sorry, back to equity. I don't have these in exactly the order they should have here, but jumping back to equitable distribution of recreational opportunities. This is what I thought was kind of interesting. We always keep hearing from the narrative. The narrative of we don't have anything to do in this town from the young people, I think was shattered for me a little bit through this whole thing. Because when you talk about equitable distribution of recreational opportunities, that may be true from more of an urban perspective, but there's a lot of young people that love outdoor recreational activity, rock crawling, mountain biking, walking on trails. So that was a big thing. The other thing that came out of the political science class, which kind of stunned me related to just the town in general, is we asked the question, how many of you would return to Carson City? And I think like 90% of the students in that class raised their hands. They want to come back. It's a town that they want to raise their family in. It's a safe town. It's that small town feel where you know everybody. You can get you can get on commissions. You can invest yourself in the community. So those were some great things. Economic vitality, kind of moving along here. Economic vitality, I think, really centered on empty storefronts. We talked a lot about that at a lot of meetings about the empty storefronts and how are we going to deal with that. In some ways, Hope, I think, was very realistic in presenting the fact that the more online that happens, the more and more storefronts are going to close, and how are we going to do that, and how flexible can we be from a land use perspective to help that. So that was one thing. Of course, homeless came up. There was a real issue regarding homeless related to economic vitality in the downtown. So that was also addressed in a number of ways. Let's see, pick up a couple extra of my notes. And then the connected city, I touched on that briefly, but they do like the idea of being able to get to these activity centers either by walking or driving or using bicycles to get there. So that worked well. So anyway, those are kind of the things that I came up with, and I kind of, again, I'm just trying to base it on the guiding themes and principles of what I think relates to what we're doing here. So let me just give me a quick check on my notes. One of the other things that came out of our meeting over at the Stay Bridge was the public asked if the consultants or the city were going to put these themes online. In other words, we're starting to hear a lot of these themes throughout the community. And I think that would be a very good thing to do if there's a way to do that within the website. Is that you guys have been taking notes religiously. I know Hope got to the point where she was actually identifying everybody in the room by name, so she could go back to them and be very personable in that respect. And I thought that was amazing the way she addressed that. But I do think there was a lot of things and that was Leanne Sarum was the one that actually asked that, just from a transparency standpoint. She said, we'd love to find out so we can either agree or disagree or let us think a little bit more about it. Because again, this whole idea is to get the community to think and start talking. And if we can somehow get out online some of those key themes that we've been hearing, and we've talked about as well, but I know the team has been very religiously taking notes, and I know Cecilia's been taking notes as well. So you've got a plethora of information, and so if you could coalesce that somewhere so that the community could take a look at that as well, I think that would be great. And now a quick advertisement for these next two meetings these next days, or later today, and I know by the time you see this, probably that won't happen, but the format I thought was really good that the consultant team has come up with. And they do have boards there. One of the other things that I thought has been real interesting, and again, kind of shattering, I think, the way the city is perceived of doing things, this approach that the consultant team and Hope have been taking has really surprised people, because a lot of people have been expecting people to walk in the door with big boards and say, this is what we're going to do. And it hasn't happened. We're coming in and we're listening. And so it's not like the city's trying to defend a plan. It's not like the city is trying to come up with this great idea at staff level. And I Hope says this religiously. This is not a staff-driven plan process. This is trying to get through to the community. And I think the format is working really well in that regard. So they have handouts at meetings, they have PowerPoints, you get the opportunity to speak individually. Hope has been very good about that. I know Commissioner Lloyd has helped with that as well. When we were at the library, getting everybody to talk, getting everybody to speak and share, and when the chairman and I were at the realtors, the rule was no dittos. You can't say I agree with that person, ditto. We would not let them do that. And so that was part of our little interaction with them. So great format, great opportunities to talk about these simple questions. They're not threatening questions. And Hope and I think the design team have been very welcoming in how they've received that from the public. And there have been a few there that have been a little more vocal than others, but everybody has gotten a chance to speak. And if you really don't want to say anything, Hope doesn't force you to do that. So, nor does the design team. So I think it's going well. I think some of the issues raised by Commissioner Borders, I think are true. I do think we need to look a little more focused at maybe the Hispanic community as far as outreach and the Native American community that's here. But I think it's working, and I think Hope and the team are willing to adjust and work through things. So I'm really excited with what we're hearing in the community. I know I'm listening. I'm getting an education as I'm learning about all this. And I think we'll just have a better plan at the end of the day. So that's my thoughts.
Chair, if I can just double check on one thing, two things from Commissioner Cron. One, you all have participated in every meeting. And to a large extent, you all have facilitated those meetings. And Commissioner Cron has helped facilitate those meetings. And I've sat there and taken the notes while he's facilitated. So he was very kind in saying Hope and the consultants, but in fairness, look in the mirror, because you all are the ones who pushed to take the show on the road. You all pushed for the listening tour. You all are showing up at these meetings, and to a large extent, you all are facilitating these meetings. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Secondly, Commissioner Cron and I had a conversation that I thought was interesting, and I think you've all observed it, and he did not mention it. But I think I want to point out that we've seen a lot of people at these meetings who we've never met before. And I'll let Commissioner Cron speak to that, because we talked about that, and we were really pleased that people came out and said, we saw it in the paper, and we just wanted to see what was going on. And it was nice to just regular people, and we welcome everybody, obviously, but just people we've never met came out and participated.
Hope, thank you. That's true. That was particularly that was in relationship with because everybody else was kind of like at the political science class, that was kind of a captive audience, and then the library was kind of a captive audience, and the realtors were too. So this was our first really public meeting, and we had probably you count at these meetings how many?
Last night was 16, but also at the library meetings, we've seen people we've never seen
before. And yeah, they come in and they're not coming with an agenda. I mean, that's what's really refreshing. They're not coming with an agenda. They're just curious about what's going on. They're the kind of people that are just saying, well, I saw that in Carson Now, or I saw that in the Nevada Appeal, or I saw it online somewhere. And it was just like, I'm taking the time out of my day to come and listen to what's going on. And again, I think there was that perception out there that they were going to see a plan. They were going to see something in front of them. And so when they got there and it was like, you're going to listen to us? Yeah, we're going to pay attention. And it was great. And there was probably, out of the 16 or 17 Hope that you were talking about, there was probably at least 6 or 8 that were new. That was kind of, I didn't count specifically, but that was the general impression I had. So we had probably a third, almost a half of the people that were at the meeting the other night brand new. And it was refreshing to see the city through their eyes in many respects. We have lived here for so long, or I have, speak just to me, I've lived here for so long, you sometimes see past the kind of the bad things, and then you kind of take for granted the good things. So it's nice to see the city through some other people's eyes, and I've really appreciated that perspective, and especially people who've never been involved in the process whatsoever. It's like they show up and they ask questions and they're interested, and I just so appreciated that. And again, I would encourage anyone who hasn't had an opportunity yet to get out and spend some time with us and our consultants through these meetings. I think you're really missing a great opportunity to see the community through other people's eyes, and that's, I think, really refreshing. Thank you, Hope. That's a good point. Thank you. I forgot that.
Okay, Commissioner Lloyd?
I just wanted to add to the meeting that Commissioner Cron and I were at for the library on the 30th. To Hope's point, there was a gentleman there who had heard Hope on the radio the day before and then attended that meeting. Also, Supervisor Schutte was there. Also, our clerk recorder was there, but he was there in his capacity as a person in our community wanting to learn more and have involvement in our community. And one of his comments that I just wanted to add kind of to the record, and it's not necessarily a planning comment for the master plan, but I think it embodies Carson City, is that this community is, there's just something special about our community that allows people to be involved and to feel that they can be involved and can have a voice in our community. And to Commissioner Cron's point, like, come to these meetings, come have these conversations. Hey, you could be the next planning commissioner. You never know. There's always a place for those voices. And then I do want to just note one more item that didn't come up in the themes that he was discussing, in items that they would like to see change. And I don't know that this is necessarily a master plan item, but it is definitely a planning item. And it's the ability to fix the confusion for small businesses when they come into our community trying to get their permits, trying to establish in our community. And I think that goes for small businesses or any nonprofit or anybody trying to establish in our community, trying to get their building permit, trying to get their business permit, and trying to be able to navigate if it's the master plan and zoning, or if it's just trying to establish and do business and help our community and interact with our community. I think that we need to streamline those processes so that they can do that in a manner that is easy, but not so easy that we're not doing checks and balances. But I can only imagine, I mean, I've gone through it on behalf of some nonprofits that I'm involved with, and as somebody who knows the systems, it was still pretty difficult. And I speak English and I know the processes. I could only imagine for someone who does not speak English and who speaks Spanish. And as our Commissioner Borders has said, 30% of our community is of that population. To come into our community and try to start a business, we really are alienating a segment of our community in that aspect as well. And I think that we need to not only address that in getting them to participate in the master plan, but to address that in being able to have them be part of our economy and part of our commerce and part of our community.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to attend quite a few meetings. In fact, I'm just thinking about it, because some ways it's almost like getting hit with a fire hose. Because what we've got is, I've attended the Men's Committee, 2 library meetings, the Builders Alliance, the Realtors, State of Nevada, Staybridge Motel. We've also done some different things with the Downtown Association and some just little smaller meetings with the Chamber. And now that we're getting out here, I have to tell you, this is my favorite part about this, is that in 2006, I actually had the opportunity to be on the other side of the table for the state of Nevada. And when we were there, we actually had the city had us come to the city hall, and they gave us a presentation. They told us how it was. They never asked us a question, and they said, get on board, basically. And this has been so much different. And it's like Commissioner Cron said, people are looking for us, where do we set up your PowerPoint, this and that. They didn't expect us to say, what do you think? And by going out and asking people, what do you think? What makes you love Carson City? What don't you like? And actually engaging them. And like Commissioner Cron said, is Hope knows the people's names. They make a point of talking to them. It's a very personal thing. Afterwards, people stay, they talk. They want to know that they have different, they have the ability to go ahead and, be on committees, change different things, do what they want to do. It is still a small town. And I think the big points that I've taken from this is we've opened communication, which is the biggest thing that we've done. The homelessness has come up a lot. Now we are actually putting people in directions so that maybe we can start making some headway on that through understanding, but also through who is the responsible people. And I think that's huge on the communication on that. On the, most everyone likes the fact that we're a base camp, essentially. They can live here in Carson City, but it is more expensive to live here than it is in the surrounding areas. That's why, you have, the one thing I was amazed with the state is that talking to them, their employees are commuting from Cold Springs. Cold Springs is on the other side of Reno, and it's up 395, and they're talking about hour and a half commutes to Carson City. That's why they're actually adding more buildings in Reno, and it has to do with workforce. It has to do with, the ability to get from here to there and to make it palatable. The other thing the state's doing, which I found was interesting, is that they are actually looking at their job classifications. That will actually give people an opportunity to see that a lot of the state employees were getting a lot less money once you take out their PERS contributions and this type of things. So it made Carson City a difficult place to purchase a home, the starter homes. The Las Vegas campus is they have a bigger workforce and it's cheaper in Las Vegas. So that's where that's going, but they have no intention of leaving Carson City, which was huge to find that out. I think the one thing that I found really interesting, and this is something that's been kind of an undercurrent in every one of these things, is that when we're talking to the business community, that it's a challenge to do business in Carson City. It is. It is a challenge with things like we have a situation going on right now where somebody had a grease fire in the restaurant. So what they had to do is they had to get shut down. Then they had to get a building permit. Then they had to get an electrician. They had to bring in the health department. So you've got the building officials, the health department, and now they're waiting because the fire department inspector is gone for a week. So that's 1 week more that they're shut down. there should be more continuity there. And I think that's a big thing. And I would like to, and this is what we're hearing, is there would like to be some kind of a facilitation that says, these different departments all have a say-so in your business, and this is how to navigate them without having to do a major plan review. And I think that's one of the recurring things. The other thing is we don't have a Carson City cheerleader. We don't have somebody out there promoting our businesses, promoting our events, because people love our events. They love our downtown. And when I talk to people, I've had the opportunity to talk with some people with like the Visitors and Convention Bureau and these people too on the outside, and they're saying, we have like the cultural group, but they're all talking about a corridor. They're not talking about Carson City. That Carson City is a base camp. My gosh, when you look at the logistics of this, and that we have 395, 580, 80, 50, and we're in the center. We are the absolute base camp. When you talk, 30 minutes to the airport, 30 minutes to the lake, 30 minutes down to the ranches, 30 minutes to Reno, if you want anything. And, just a couple hours over to Sacramento. A lot of people live here. They moved here from California, but they like the location because of the proximity to their families and things like this. So, as far as logistics, I'm starting to see that we are getting more and more warehouses in Reno. I'm starting to see that we just approved one out here at the airport. So I think that might be something, but we don't have a specific cheerleader. And it is very disheartening when our cheerleaders are doing events in Reno. I find that very disheartening, and the community finds it very disheartening. The other thing that I think is really interesting is because they bring out things that we really have no oversight over. But they talk about, we love the open space, we love the parks. But then when you get on a one-on-one with them and basically talking to them and saying, okay, great, this is wonderful, but do you realize because of the parks, because of open space, because of the state government, because of the city government, and because of all the nonprofits, only less than right around 18% of the people are the only people that are paying the taxes. So how are you going to fit roads? How are you going to do all of the things that this community wants? And I think that a lot of people think, well, the city can step in and fix the buildings and do all these things. I think that maybe like they did in 2007, is maybe there should be some redevelopment things for different areas. I think zoning should be something too. And these are things that people are saying. They're saying, let's not make it cumbersome. Let's make it easier, not to just let anybody in, but at the same point is not have a process to get into your business to be 6 months and to continue to go through different hurdles. One thing I do want to say out here that has been brought up to me on a couple occasions, and is that for a brick and mortar restaurant has to put in a grease interceptor. And so this is the arduous thing because it's like 25 grand. So, however, food trucks that are not in this area are coming in here, and people think food trucks are really great. They have portable grease interceptors, and they're competing with our brick and mortars. And our brick and mortars are having a problem with that too. So those are the kind of things that I'm hearing. And, good things though too. When we were talking to the state yesterday, they said, in Vegas, when we went to bought the Thomas and Mack, we actually have a welcome packet for each one of our state offices. And what it tells us about the restaurants. It tells us about the different things. It has a little bit of things about the schools. Tells us about the events. We don't, like I said, we don't have a cheerleader that is actually putting together something like that. One of the things I actually had the opportunity to go down in a really slow elevator, which was fun too. But we talked about that the state has a different kind of accounting system. They don't have an accounting system that typically they teach in school. It's not your typical Excel. It's kind of a hybrid thing. And they are in the process of redoing it. And we talked about, the ability that Carson City, being as small as it is, and the community being able to talk, is that we can get people together to say, okay, do you want to put part of an AP program in? Do you want to go ahead and do WNC? Can we go ahead and teach our youth here this mystery, state accounting system, and actually get these kids going through internships and so forth like this, and keep them in Carson, bring them in Carson, create the workforce? Because I think we've got really dynamic people that can put that together. The other thing that's exciting is that one of their big concerns was childcare. And I was able to share with them that the Boys and Girls Club is doing all these things in Carson City, which in Reno and areas like this, they don't have all that childcare available, and they're finding the constraints there. But Carson City is trying to adapt to the workforce, keep them there. And I think that all of that, is really, really important. People, they want to have diverse housing. And I think that we've got some people that can actually kind of think out of the box. We have more people that if we change kind of downtown centers into little urban area pocket things, it would be nice to, and what I'm hearing is it'd be nice to actually be able to have, like they said, retail on the bottom, housing on the top. But it does not all need to be in the downtown core, because we have other areas. We have areas on Highway 50. We have areas out off of College Parkway. We have some of these different areas that could create these other little neighborhood centers and have the walkability. I think that's probably it. All the other commissioners have covered the other items. So, thank you, Hope.
Thank you. And so I think Commissioner Borders provided some input on sort of some weaknesses in our process to date. I'd just be curious if anyone else wants to identify some weaknesses while you're together that we should focus on. We do have some more meetings coming up, and some of you are scheduled for those. I have asked, actually during this meeting, I asked Armando to reach out to the tribal community to set up that meeting. And we will reach out to the Latinx community, and Chairman Preston has again started the conversation at the realtors level with Spanish-speaking realtors to try to do outreach at that level. So that point's really well taken. But I'm open to constructive criticism and opportunity because we want this to be really good. So any observations you have that we can do better, I'm ready to write.
I think we need to make sure we have that ad in the Carson Now and make sure that it's up front. And the other thing I would like to see is on our little channel that we have is an ad for it on the channel. Because right now, our little placards on the channel have not changed. They're really not talking about master plan on what's that, 191 or some kind of thing. So I'd like to see that there. The other thing is I think that we need to take more advantage of Nextdoor and hit the different communities on Nextdoor. And then there's community groups on Facebook. And I've seen, we've actually loaded them up and done a lot of sharing within the real estate community. But everywhere I go, I have the little flyers and those neat little cards and hand them out to people. So I think it's got to be word of mouth, and people have got to want to come. So,
Commissioner Lloyd, the first thing is I know we might not have the social media, but the city does. Some of their social media isn't quite as active, but like every other department, like the library has social media, share it on there. Then we can all share it, and then other people can share it, and it can go viral. I think even the library has a TikTok. I didn't start that, by the way. That would have not been me. The other thing, and I heard the high schoolers talking about it, I'm not suggesting not to use the crown and the jewels, but two of the high schoolers were equating that to the Infinity Gauntlet and Thor's snap of the finger.
Sorry, I don't even know what that is, but okay, I'll drop the
So
crown.
you don't
No
have to,
problem.
no, you don't have to drop it. I'm just suggesting maybe with the younger crowd or maybe some Marvel fans. You put your hand in this glove and you have collect all the jewels and then you snap and then half the human population disappears. So
Send me the link.
I'll send you a clip. It's a long series of movies. Anyway, so I did think that was funny. They're gonna never forget it. They're gonna never forget that analogy though. So, but I do think it is a good analogy.
All right. Is there anything else from the commissioners?
Yes, look at your table.
I can't, my table is dark, guys. It is broken.
Turn it on. Yeah.
Okay, we can do it the old-fashioned
All
way.
right, I'm next then.
Okay, well, Commissioner Borders is over here kicking me under the table, so yeah. Thank you. Yeah, mine's dead. Okay. Okay, thank you.
A lot of what we've talked about today really is informative, but I'm not sure it's appropriate for the master plan. Some of it is, but some of it may not be. But what I really like to hear from these two ladies sitting in front of us is some feedback on where you think we are, where you think we're going, and how we doing from your side.
Thanks, Commissioner Borders. I'll jump in here. I think first I would echo Hope's comment. It's been super productive, I think, to have you guys engaged in this conversation and out there having conversations with the community. Just to have those communication lines open. I think while many of the, kind of big picture ideas that are being tossed around may not pertain exactly to what happens on the land use map, a lot of the policies in the plan do refer to quality of life aspects. And so I think there is a way to, it helps, it's a lens through which we can kind of review what's in the plan now and see what's still valid and what's not. So I think there is a way to sort of capture that within the plan, even though it's not a primary focus in some of those areas. What we emphasized last night with our community conversation is that, we want to get all this feedback on the table, but the more specific feedback, like as we go through this process, we're going to get more and more specific. And so if there is an aspect of, land use that you're uncomfortable with, kind of the changes that you're seeing in the community, the more direct people can be about, looking at the map we have now. What I encourage some folks to think about, that said, gosh, there's just so much, it's overwhelming. Focus on your neighborhood, focus on that vacant lot in your area that, you are worried about what's going to happen in the future. Get an understanding of what the master plan says about that area right now, and tell us if you think that's not on track. And, that's where we really need to focus the conversations moving forward. We'll be, thinking about, okay, we've heard all this feedback, what types of changes do we actually think are warranted based on that feedback? And so I think as you guys are continuing to have conversations and, hearing things about specific land use questions, just encouraging people to be specific. Hope mentioned the additional public meetings we're having, but we also have a online survey that's up that we're asking folks, that will be open through May 3rd. So, I think a lot of folks last night were just sort of taking it all in and, a lot of information, just sort of starting to process, well, what do we need to weigh in on? We want people to take some time and think about what they've heard and what concerns them, what doesn't, and provide some feedback. So we've got some very specific questions about housing in that survey. We've got some questions about non-residential uses. If people don't want to see the vacant buildings, what do we want to encourage in those areas? And we have a lot of areas to focus on. So that is going to be one of the biggest challenges. I think it is, it's a large area and we have, a limited amount of demand. And so how do we think creatively to try to identify some priorities moving forward. And then the other questions that are in the survey really relate back to the themes, and Commissioner Cron kind of touched on that. You know, getting folks to think specifically about, here's what's important to me, but actually reviewing those and telling us, generally, are we still on the right track with those? Do we, is our vision, how does it need to evolve? One of the most astute comments I think, I took away yesterday was actually, I think was it our fire chief, Hope? Who was there, as the fire chief, but also as a citizen, and said, really wanted to think not about where we are today and really thinking ahead, and just sort of encouraging people to kind of think creatively and think broadly about what they want the community to be in the future. So I think we're on the right track. I think, we're going to kind of ground things as we go and get more specific. But I think we're getting the juices flowing and people, starting to think about things. So I think we're on the right track, and we appreciate all the work you guys have put in. Thank you.
Commissioner DeChristopher? Oops.
Mine is just for a point of clarification, Madam Chair. On the meetings, outside of the public meetings such as we're having today, the smaller ones, I had it in my head that we would have to tell you, correct, as to whether or not we would be in attendance at a meeting if we had a desire to be there, and then you'd let us know if that's...
Actually, we were just quite coordinating with Hope because we don't know what meetings are available or things like this. But no,
Okay.
if there's some meetings that you would like to attend, we
Do
can
I need to let anyone know, or do I just attend?
We have to make sure we don't have a quorum. So what's been happening is as the meetings come up, I've been talking with the chair, and um, we just been saying, okay, who should we send? And part of it is just rotating who's been at what meetings. And in terms of the community meetings we're having, you can attend those. You can't start talking about it, but it's a community-wide meeting. You're allowed to go to a community-wide meeting. So if you want to go to the meetings today, for example, you can just attend. You don't need special permission. That's any member of the community can go. But these other meetings we've been having where we've been sort of coordinating, like with the library, who's going to cover that one. Because again, it's, I'm not sure we spoke specifically about this today, but the Planning Commission is the steering committee. So when this whole process started, the question was, well, are we going to create a steering committee? And the answer was, well, we have a steering committee. It's the Planning Commission. They do nothing but land use. So you are that group. And so it was really important to have you at all these meetings, whether it was a meeting with the state legislature, a meeting with the administrative, all these, the Rotary, whoever it is, so that you can hear as members of the steering committee while not having a quorum there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think so. So in other words, it would be, the invitation would be coming from you, Terry, after you coordinate with Hope? Okay. Okay. So if we do have a specific interest with a segment of the population we know you'll be meeting with, or as a suggestion who you should meet with, we can let you both know and then wait for, okay. And then the other question I had for Darcy and Maggie, I noticed when Commissioner Borders presented, he did do it within the framework of the existing master plan. Is that helpful just in terms of, I ask because I think it was helpful to me in that here's where we are today. What are we looking at changing? While you're directing the public to look at their local area, and then we as planning commissioners are giving feedback as it pertains to the existing master plan.
I think it's helpful if it makes sense, if it helps you think about, kind of where we're headed. We will get, like, as we start to talk about, what potential changes we're proposing in different areas, we will tie it back to the feedback we're hearing so that we have a clear rationale between, where we're proposing changes or not, based on what we're hearing. So we will get there, but it's really up to you in terms of how you process that information, because we will be, and we've already done some from the March meetings, for example, in terms of just some of the key themes, and we've been sharing those at the public meeting. But we will put together a summary to post online, but it's going to be evolving. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it, but we will definitely kind of guide everybody back to that place as we go, certainly into our next round of meetings, because we'll be talking about actual changes. So we'll say, here's what we've been hearing, here's what we're proposing, what do you think? And that's where really the back and forth starts in terms of, actual, let's talk about what's going to change and what's not. So, thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two observations, one for Hope, one for the consulting team. Hope, it strikes me, and I have not been in the city for years and years, but this strikes me as the best public engagement process I've seen in Carson City in my time here. I'm wondering if your department or if the city at large has what amounts to a follow-up process with people who have been engaged, who we've captured contact information from, because one of the realities of government is this sort of dolphining in and out of the water of engaging with the public, and I think we're probably sowing the seeds as a steering body to less painful, more comprehensive engagement in the future if we can kind of close the loop with as many people as we can on this process. That's a vague suggestion rather than a specific one, and I know it means more work, but it seems like it would be worth doing.
And just to let you know how it's working, as people choose to give us their information, they're not required to give us their information. Cecilia's inputting it into the system so that as there's information on the master plan website, that information, those people are notified.
Okay.
So the good news is we're early in the process, so they are receiving information because they're added to the noticing list at for the master plan update website. But your point's well taken. Once we've adopted the master plan, which again is March 2025, how do we keep that group engaged? And we'll think about that.
Thank you. I want to say Celia, and it's Cecilia, right? Thank you. I'm terrible with names. I know it's very early, and I know you've gotten a lot of feedback from all of heaven and earth. But do you have a sense that, broadly speaking, our land use patterns are a bit too restrictive and need to be loosened, or are a bit wobbly and need to be tightened up? And I know I'm kind of backing you into a corner with that, but you have gotten so much input, and you're the focal point for all this input, so you may have a more complete picture than any of us do individually. I'm just wondering if you have a sense of that.
And sorry, you directed that to Cecilia, who's in the audience, but I think
I'm so sorry.
I'm Darcy.
Did I not just say terrible with names?
No, I'm the same way. So I just wanted to clarify. So I think in terms of the land use patterns, the master plan framework provided a pretty flexible foundation for that. I think over time, and we see this in all the communities we work with, you find things that are working and things that aren't. And so I think it's a matter of recalibrating the flexibility to work for today's uses and different things. And so I think what we're learning through the process is where some of those sticking points are of, maybe there's restrictions that just don't make sense, that made sense 25 years ago or whatnot. And so I think the foundation is good. I think it's just a question of, how do we make sure it fits today's needs, and hopes, kind of keeps reminding everyone that, we're in a really different situation than we were.
Right.
And so we're really looking at, do they still make sense for what needs we'll have in the future? And if not, let's talk about where those changes are. So that's sort of one layer of changes. The other layer of potential changes that will, be brought forward through the conversation is where we're hearing from the community that we don't, we are not comfortable with what's proposed in a specific location. So we want to have a conversation about that. And, whether a change happens or not, I think it's going to come out of the process. But that's what we're really encouraging, is if there is a challenge with what's on on the books today in the plan, now's the time to talk about it and figure out what makes sense. So I think, there's no preconceived notion about what it's going to look like. I think it's just, let's revisit it and talk about just from a practical standpoint where we have challenges, and then from a community input standpoint where we have some challenges, and figure out, where do we need to make some changes moving forward. So I don't know if that fully.
No, that's
Okay.
very helpful. Hope made the mistake of referring to us as the steering body, so I want to take a second and do some steering. I always have concerns with land use planning exercises that people, well-intentioned people, smart people, are reflexively defensive. You mentioned you start with telling people to look at their neighborhood. I get that. It's a human scale thing. It's what they know. But I also get that that is the place where people will say, well, we're changing this over my dead body, right? So one of the things that I want to encourage you as the consulting team, my fellow commissioners, as folks who will eventually have a review and input on this process, is land use defines the destiny of parcels, plots, the businesses, the lives that are on them. And the more fine-grained and more restrictive those land uses are, the more we are picking winners and losers. And if we had, and by we, I mean the broadest possible we of local government, if we had a great record of picking winners and losers, that would be fine, but the record is mixed at best. So my encouragement would be, yes, take in all of this input from everybody, including me, who wants the best of Carson City to stay the best, but resist the urge that a lot of folks have to say, okay, and because of that, we shall not do this in the future on this piece of land. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. I have two things. One of the items, so I did sign up for the newsletter thing, whatever. I did get the email. The email did not have this meeting on it. And I know that this meeting wasn't a meeting for input, but it didn't, I think it probably still should have had this meeting on it. So I just wanted to make that a comment. Then my next comment is, and I don't know if legal would want to weigh in on any of this, but I think it could be interesting. We do have, meaning the city of Carson City, has a good number of followers on LinkedIn, has a good number of followers on like Twitter, and doing a Twitter Spaces. And so, or a Twitter, is it called Twitter Spaces? I think it's called Twitter Spaces. It's a live where you talk about things, and then you have users also give input. So it's like it's like a live chat. Or like a LinkedIn Live or something like that, where we could try to reach a different type of audience. I don't know how, if there is a barrier to like a public meeting format, or if maybe like if there isn't 7 commissioners there, if that would mean that it's not an open meeting and that we don't have, like, there's not the same barriers there. But I'm just putting that out there as something that I think could be a useful instrument to gather some additional input from our community in different ways, and potentially gather some more input from youth in our community that use those types of tools. I believe we also have a Snapchat, but I don't use Snapchat, so I can't check how many followers we have. So.
What we can do is I'll talk to our public information officer, who kind of handles the city's social media, as well as the DA's office, and I'll follow up with Commissioner Lloyd, since she's far more familiar with these tools than I am, and that will be a follow-up.
Commissioner Cron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as another perspective to what Commissioner Brooks said, and I do believe that flexibility is very important, but I also think that dependability is very important for the community. I mean, we have heard time and time again that, people in a neighborhood really want to make sure that what's going to happen in their neighborhood is something is not going to change on them. We've seen that on the west side a lot of times where people felt that the zoning or some of the land uses out there were not defined enough, and so they were caught off guard by some of the flexibility that was built into the system. So I think there's a balance here. I mean, I certainly want to be as flexible as we can because I think there's the opportunity to, bring in new businesses and new different types of development that are healthy for a community. But on the other hand, at least I think we want to be sensitive, at least to what a number of things we hear in these neighborhood or these meetings, that not only are meetings we're hearing now, but also in some of the public testimony we get, that the public was sort of caught off guard, or at least that's their perception. So I think there's a balance here between trying to be as flexible as we can be, but also trying to provide the community with some sort of assurance that if this particular land use is going to be identified, that it is then followed through the zoning. So it's not that I'm disagreeing, I'm just saying here's another perspective.
I think one of the things that comes up too is that people don't seem to be informed about their neighborhood, and a lot of it, and I know that we've talked about this, is the map is confusing. And I think that one of the things is that when we do the map, it might be a good idea to show all of those areas that are not have the ability to be on the tax base. And I think that's important because when people see how many things are taken up by the state, by the city, by the parks, by the schools, and by nonprofits, those are all exempt. So when they look at that, then they can say, okay, the balance of the responsibility to keep our city going and to, bring people in, to make sure our kids can come back and that type of thing is limited to different infill type of areas. And it was amazing to me is that when we started talking about the zoning and the maps, even people in the real estate community were not familiar with it. And to me, I felt that was a real disconnect. But I think because it is so confusing in the core areas with the multiple zoning overlays that are difficult, to read. And so if there was some way we could simplify that and let people know, I know years ago we used to have a thing, and they really haven't pushed it here, but we used to say that is not a green belt, that's actually privately owned, and we can't determine what that's going to be in the future. And I think that that's one of the things that people have property rights, and they have the rights to go ahead and utilize their property. And if you don't know that that property belongs to somebody else and it is not yours, then you take ownership of it, which may not be there. So I think that's one of the other things that came up is that we have to say a lot of times in this meeting is we don't protect view corridors. However, we have gone ahead as a community and bought the development rights for the open space. But by buying those rights, the development rights, it actually has taken it from being a possible income source to now it's something that needs to be maintained. And I think that's some of the things that when you start talking to people, and that's what the community meetings have done too, is it's given us a one-on-one where we can explain that to people. But if we could do it more in diagrams, something that would be available, I think that would be very, very helpful. Okay, and any further comments? Okay, seeing none, let's go to the public comment. Oh, I thought we did staff report. I feel like it's just been a staff report.
Nothing. I think it was a great meeting, and I want to compliment the consultants as well. Darcy and Maggie are They're absolute professionals. I'm so grateful they joined Carson City on this venture, and I feel like we're really in good hands. So thank you to them, and that's all I have.
Commissioner Borders.
As a commissioner comment, we're moving forward with the master plan. It's set to be adopted in March of next year. The key element that goes with the master plan is Chapter 18, the zoning requirements, and they're still not available. And we're going to have a new zoning plan, which is no doubt going to change some of that. I see a tremendous disconnect, and I know I've beat up our attorney more than once about this, but 4 years to get a document is way too long. And we need a document we can work with, because we're going to have a new master plan and we're still going to be operating under our old Chapter 18.
In fairness, the revision to Title 18 is primarily a formatting issue, so to speak, as opposed to substantive. There are some substantive modifications, but because the DA's office is looking at the entire presentation, if you will, I think once the master plan's adopted, we then will likely need to amend the zoning ordinance to implement the master plan, and it will be an easier job because the format of the zoning ordinance, so to speak, Title 18, is going to be a format that the board's pleased with, that the DA's office is pleased with, that the planning commission is pleased with. And so that's really was the impetus, was looking at the structure of the document. So I hear what you're saying. I spoke with Dan Yu about it, I think last week it was. And so he is absolutely working on it, and it's really hard to do things in-house. If we were doing the master plan in-house, we would not be as far along as we are.
Oh, absolutely. So that begs the question.
Understood. So I think even if we weren't working on Title 18, when the master plan's done, we would still have to amend Title 18.
No doubt, but we
So-
don't have a document to amend to yet.
Right, but I feel like we're in good shape because I know Dan Yu's working on it, and I also know that I know the scope of changes, which are not big ticket items, and it's primarily a formatting exercise, in my opinion. But point well taken again.
Yes, ma'am. I've said it.
Okay. Uh-huh. Well, the other question that I have though too is that if it is a formatting question, is it because one of the things that's coming out in this meeting is that I'm hearing so much public information in regards to specifics that I would like to be able to review because we don't know what it's about. I mean, when I have heard something and I would like to actually see if that's the case, that a duplex can only be built on a corner and it has to have 2 entrances. That's why we're not having duplexes. Yeah, I'm hearing this, but I'm one of these people that's hands-on. I want to read it. I want to look at it and say, does that what it says? And is that what we want it to say?
First, that is a true statement. The code does read that way. Secondly, what we can do is agendize for a future meeting, a discussion on the Title 18 update, kind of where we are, what the focus is of it, what are the substantive changes in it, so that it refreshes everybody's memory.
Be very helpful, so thank you. Okay, any further comment? Okay, now public comment, please. Public is invited to this time to come comment on any matter that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. No action can be taken on the matter raised under this item of the agenda. Okay, Robin?
Good morning, everyone. Great discussion. I wanted to really, Robin Orloff. I live on Prison Hill, no, Carson City. I want to compliment the commissioners for all the opportunities to, and Hope definitely for the opportunities to speak up and contribute to the master plan discussion. The library meeting was awesome. I really enjoyed that. A lot of interaction. Excuse me, I'm a little scattered. I was on my way to run the dog and I went, oh, there's a meeting, and I was listening to it on the way. So I have a little bit of input maybe on, I'm trying to read this master plan and be specific to it. But I have concerns. We're writing the plan, and I really want to make sure that we're implementing the plan the way we're writing it and our concerns are realized. I'm going to read, for instance, and it's mostly about open space, Parks and Rec, which is why I moved to Carson City. Lived in Nevada for 37 years, worked in Carson City 36, and lived here in Carson City for 18, and I came here for the open space and the trails. Vision, the scenic and environmental quality of its dramatic natural surroundings, quality of life of its residents. That's one quote. And the other quote specifically for open space, preserved by the city, for conservation, resource protection, recreational use, and protect sensitive areas, provide wildlife habitat, view protection, and protect visual buffers along the important scenic corridor and significant ridge lines. So I have concerns about what we are doing. I think maybe some of our open space, in my opinion, is now being developed on steroids. I think that the west side, the muscle-powered trails are awesome. I'm really concerned about Carson River 2 and Carson River 3. They're in a conservation easement. They have documents that protect them, the open space, the Prison Hill documents, all the 1306 and the conservation easement with NRS 111390, so they're supposed to be protected. But my concern is we're putting what looks to me like a road in the foothills, which is our view shed, through swaths and miles of natural sagebrush community. And I just don't think that coordinates with what the language is in our master plan and what probably the language will be in the next master plan. I think we have to accommodate all users, but I'm not sure we need a construction-built road in a non-motorized area. I think Prison Hill is absolutely precious, and we need to preserve it according to all of the verbiage. And the statement made about the rock crawler loving it, I dirt bike there, I love it. I'm starting to ride the rock. It's a hard fall. It is a special area, but we are really affecting some very sensitive resources there that I'm surprised are not being protected. I'm happy to talk to any of you about it, and it's good to see it, and I hope we can make sure we address it. Thank you very much.
Denny?
Thank you. Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Chair and Commission. Ditto, except for I will not invite you on the hill to show you. And I would really, the reason I know it as well as I do is because a person very special to me is sharing it. And so I do know it a lot more personally than I would have been able to on my own, and it is beautiful. Please consider keeping your eyes on it and stay involved. The thing that I'd like to add to this, Commissioner Brooks brought up that land use does affect all of us and all the lives in the area. And I want to just remind everybody that there's no such thing to me as a vacant lot. And there's no such thing as a lack of a life, whether it's a weed, whether it's a bug that lives on that weed, or whether it's sage. And I'd like people to stop referring to things just as vacant lots or open space. Define it for me. Let me know what's the intent, what's the opportunity, what's the restrictions, and what the restraints are and considerations as to tax process. I would like to say that saving our environment really is going to be a draw to tourists. Places like the Galapagos Islands, they were developing so quickly they forgot that the resource that we're drawing people to them was the environment, were the critters on it. New Zealand has found that their whole monetary situation was changed when they started to get to a tourist interest location, and the tourists were coming because of the sea, because of the air, because of the plants and the animals. And they weren't coming for the things that you would think, oh, I just want to get away and I want to stay in a hotel room. They were actually being drawn by the environment. And if we don't have that in our master plans, then we're making a mistake, I believe. We can grow as long as people are going to have kids. We want to provide housing. We've got to remember the housing for the bugs. Our environment is sustaining them, and the sustainability of our environment keeps us alive. So I want that to be a mainstay in this. And I'd like to add, while I have a couple seconds, is please put every meeting on this calendar. I don't have all the resources everybody else has. I have the ones, the paper and several others, and I've been advised about several others. And I want to thank those people for doing that, but I don't have access all the time. Please put every meeting that is a public, open, with people from the city at those meetings on this. Thank you.
Mayor, before we adjourn, if I can just remind the community, we will be back in this building at the community center tonight, or this afternoon at 2:00. And then a second meeting at 5:30 to get community input, and the consultants will be presenting at that meeting. Also, there's a virtual meeting on April 18th at 5:00. And the survey is open till May 3rd. And the website is envisioncarsoncity.org, and that's with an E. And you can get there through carson.org, the Community Development Department, or just you can email planning@carson.org, and we can certainly get you all the information.
Thank you. Right? Okay, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn. Adjourned. Thank you. Oh, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you.